Welcome to another episode of the Dentology Podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. What a fabulous first year that was for the Dentology Podcast.
Flown by, truly flown by. What's that? Two seasons?
2 seasons, a terrific bunch of guests.
Some of the guests. Some of those episodes were truly stunning.
I tell you what, should we jump to some of our favourite clips?
Yeah, good idea. It'll be interesting to see him again, actually.
Yeah. On the Wells on Wheels, obviously, I'll leave you to kind of explain more what it's about, but it obviously helps women and young children in India get access to water. And before you explain about kind of what that charity is and how it came about, was it a coincidence that this whole Wells on Wheels thing started at about the same time as you started your own family? Was there a connection that kind of said, I now have a family of my own, and we are so fortunate, we're so privileged, and that happens just because we live in the UK. Living in the UK, our privilege and access to things is on another level to so many people on the planet. Was there a connection between your family and then wanted to try to, lift up and help the people in a really positive way in some of these regions in India?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a extremely strong link between me becoming a father. So my daughter's 4 now. So 4 years ago, when that moment happened, and it takes, for us blokes, sometimes it takes a little while to really understand that, has this actually just happened? Am I a father now? And there's a massive boy to man moment. And I mean, for me anyway, there was a big boy to man moment, and I just saw
we're both nodding, Shaz, as you can see. We're both nodding and agreeing with it. And I think between us, we've probably got enough for a father-side team.
I think we do.
At least.
I think we do.
Maybe 2.
That's like, you inspire me because you've done it so many times. I mean, I've just got the one. And what I was going on to say is, I've seen like how much we invest in wrapping them in cotton wool in all aspects of their life. And, I use this example that, in the sun, when my daughter's out, we smother her in sun protection. And, obviously I'll go on to explain the charity, but there's girls in rural India walking, younger than my daughter sometimes, walking for hours, carrying something very heavy back and forth, and they're doing it with a smile. So I felt, just when I became a parent, that I feel parents generally have a responsibility to other innocent children that don't have protection. And it was a massive link for me. So I got softened up at that point. And it just, because, in the front of my mind, I wanted to do good, the opportunities just connected together, and I was able to form Wells on Wheels.
Mm. So could you just give us a couple of minutes? What is Wells on Wheels for the people listening?
Absolutely. So I'll explain what Wells on Wheels is, but I'll just explain how it came about as well, very quickly. Mm-hmm. As I said, look, I always wanted to do good. So I found it extremely difficult to donate to charities. So I have a cousin in India, and I said to him that, please, can you, in your spare time, go into villages, and, there's a common issue of, dad is trying to get his daughter married. And there's a lot of pressure. So some of these dads will go and take out massive loans. And by massive loans, it's like, we're talking 500 quid. Yeah. But for them, it's till the end of life. And some of them even die very early because they've done everything to pay off these loans. So there's lots of hardship. Someone's had a baby, they haven't got the basics. So I told my cousin, look, you just need to do me a favor, go into these villages, identify who they are. And when you are giving them the goods, so we wouldn't give cash in most instances, we'd arrange what they need. Just film it and send it to me. So on 2 occasions, he was, on one occasion he was FaceTiming because there's a village near to Mumbai. Other occasion he was videoing. I could see it. It was always lunchtime because that's when he would go. That's when he would be free. Blazing heat. And he would be quite upset with me. He's like, can we stop doing this? Because I'm dying here. And I could see like an army of what looked like ants walking in the background with these barrels on their head. And they were quite far away. So the first time, I didn't say anything because it was quite short. Second time, again, same time. So here's a grown man complaining to me about the heat, and I can see very young girls and mothers walking in the background. And I started asking him questions, and he was giving me very basic answers like, they're lucky they've even got water. This is normal here. You guys in the West think you want to solve everything. It was that kind of relationship I had with him. And left it at that. And that's when I started to research. So I went back to the office and started researching, so we get water delivery. So if you've got a cooler in your office, you see those big barrels of water. So that got delivered one day. And I'm not very good with my hands unless it's on a keyboard and mouse. So I was helping take the water bottles down. And, I just got that eureka moment, when we were putting it down and it was rolling a little bit, that let me just look into finding a manufacturer that could turn this into something that would roll. That's as far as I thought at that point in time. Started Googling it, and almost my charity came to life that very same day, because I found a lady called Cynthia who had the same type of eureka moment, who had been in India for 2 years before and gone through various revisions of what was this water wheel. And I got in touch with her, and she said, yep, this is the manufacturer. This is my product. We've trialed it for years and years and years. It works in heavy terrain. It's food grade plastic. The manufacturer gives you an 18-month warranty on this. We've known for it to last. Like, there's very few that go wrong because it's such a simple design. I could the very next day put in an order for wheels. It's about £23, but £28 delivered. And that's it. It was my charity. I started fundraising straight away.
Wow.
I tell you what I find amazing, and it's something that listening to you do is you spot something, because when you showed it to me, I thought to myself, I used to go camping, we had those things, we had those big ton on, and you wheel it to and from the water. But it's fascinating that must be 35 years ago. And it took you and this woman to suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, we can adapt that, use it and utilize it to an issue that's been there for centuries. I think it's amazing that you sort of saw something and then did something about it and just spotted that opportunity, which sort of goes back to printing for 5p, your digital printing little copies and also, whatever it is. It's brilliant.
And I think for the women and the children, one, I think there's a massive health benefit in that they're not carrying these extraordinarily heavy barrels of water on their head. But also I think it's inspiring for them. It gives them hope. It kind of says to them, things can get better. For you and your family, here's a change. And if that sparks their thinking to have more ambition or try and change things in their local community, it's great. And as a result of that, has that had a positive impact on your core business? Has that changed the way that Digimax operates, how you think, how your team think? Has it come back into your business side of things?
Internally, it's been really interesting, because for the ones who are on that same journey as me, who are quite soft in that sense, they are the first to put their hand up. They are the ones coming up with ideas. They're the ones telling their family that this is what we do. And they are so engaged. And, it's built a separate kind of culture. And obviously, like there's 30 in our team, but there's going to be some that for them, it's just like, I cannot even connect with this. No, goodness, I'm just going to lie low. And then so most of them are extremely engaged. But from an external point of view, look, no one's ever told me anyway that we use you because we came to you because of the water wheel concept. No one's actually ever said that. But I know I will use companies that have a strong CSR focus in their business. That tells me they're kind businesses. That tells me that they care. And that tells me they're going to care about the product or service that they're going to supply to me. As long as it's, there's CSR's a genuine thing for them and it's not, a pantomime, which happens as well for some companies. So, I think it must have some external benefit, but no one's ever told me.
I love that clip. I really enjoyed listening back to that.
I tell you what, it really resonated with me.
The problem with the industry as well is I think a lot of people just didn't understand what I was doing. They were like, how is this going to work? How is this a viable business model? Like, most people thought I was insane. A lot of people laughed. A lot of people told me it couldn't be done. And again, not to do this sort of thing, but sometimes as a woman as well, and a younger woman looking up to sort of like peers for help and support. No one really poo-pooed it, but at first they just didn't understand it. And then as it started to gain momentum, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, wow, you're doing amazing. Oh, you've done really well. And like, oh, you're a genius. I'm like,
and it's
you didn't say that at the time.
I was going to say it's flattering and irritating at the same time.
Can I join you?
Because
Yeah.
I think anything that hasn't been done before, that you know, most people say it's impossible, which is why it hasn't been done before. And the really smart people say, well, what is the art of the possible? What could be done? And it's those people that generally change things and move it on. And it's very easy to then say, after the event, oh, well, it's obvious. But it wasn't obvious at the time it happened because it didn't even exist as a thing.
But there's been times as well, and obviously never to like, you know, badmouth anyone and things, but there were times when comments arise such as, well, why are they using her? Why have they chosen to work with her? She's just a hygienist.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear stuff like that, I'm tough skinned. Okay, remember, this is not an issue for me. If anything, it just stoked the fire even more. I'm like, keep coming at me with that attitude and mentality, because this is probably why we still have some of the problems we have in dentistry. So I have this big gripe when people go, oh, but we've always done it this way. And I'm like, like that just, I can't work with people or around people that have that sort of mentality. And I'm like, we have problems. I'm a problem solution kind of girl. I loved puzzles growing up. I still love it now. And I think that's why I really enjoy what I'm doing with the brand and the business, in the sense that there are problems and I'm finding solutions, which therefore propositions me really well in front of, for example, not just my patient base, but also the industry, which is why it has led to partnerships or industry involvement, because there are people who can see what I am doing, and there are now other clinicians who are following this business model because it works.
But also from a human health and a patient point of view, you know, hygiene is a very easy access point into dentistry. So if you get it right and you can get patients in on a hygiene program, actually it turns around and it's no longer the dental practice referring to the hygienist. You end up with a good hygiene program and suddenly you start referring people into dentistry. So it's the same thing, just viewed in a slightly different way. And patients will engage with the people they feel most comfortable engaging with.
It's more approachable, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Well, this is the other thing as well. So bearing in mind, I am a lot of people's first contact, in the sense like at the moment, particularly post sort of lockdown and COVID, I've got patients that haven't come in years, and then they've perhaps seen my social media or they've read about me in an article. And they finally, after years of avoiding the dental chair, had plucked up the courage to come. At that point, then, I am that first touch point. I have the opportunity to show them that you can have a pleasant experience. Also, because there's certain elements of dentistry which I can't do, I'm able to then talk them through those procedures. And because I'm not going to be carrying them out, they almost feel like, well, I trust you because you don't have a hidden agenda to be carrying them out.
From the patient's point of view, what you can and what you can't do doesn't really bother them. In that moment, you are the face of dentistry.
Yeah, you are. That's right.
You are the face of dentistry. That interaction is going to determine whether they decide to come back, whether they're going to tell their friends, whether they're going to have a positive experience. So the actual clinical, what you can do and what you can't do, kind of is by the by. It's an experience, isn't it? If that goes well, it blows up for everybody.
Because this is the other aspect to it as well. People say, well, there's no money in a healthy mouth. And I'm like, well, these are someone, for example, someone who hasn't come for 7 years, who is now coming every 3 months and is happy coming every 3 months because they now see the value in the investment. So, you know, I'm pretty fully booked these days, and that's only sort of growing and expanding, because once you get them through the door and you convert them, that's it, which means what I set out with my business model at the very beginning is and the sort of my company ethos and messaging has paid off, to the point where I don't know if you knew or not, but I obviously went back to uni last year and did my second degree.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm now a dental therapist, which therefore means I've now expanded my scope of practice even further to therefore mean that when the patient comes in, if they do need some of that basic dentistry, I can now complete that for them. And I think, again, post-COVID and with waiting times and as a business model in terms of how we all work together, actually utilizing hygienists and therapists to their full scope of practice has got to be the way forward. And I encourage more and more people to actually work better with their hygienists and therapists if they're not already.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was another of my favourites.
That's brilliant. I just, stories of people are just amazing, aren't they?
But I'm just like, yeah, you need to stop that silly rolling around stuff now, don't you? Really, you need to chuck it in. You've got a professional life ahead of you. You need to. And I was like, and this was the moment of reckoning. It was like, Dad, it's because I do that on the side that it allows me to perform in the educational side. And it's like the pin dropped it. And it was probably about 2008, 2009 when that kind of happened. And I was like, oh, so I actually need this to be good at this. And then ever since, I mean, it's always a continuous battle for time. I've heard a fantastic video from a doctor from the US, and he used the analogy, it's like going out with two girlfriends, both hate each other, both know about each other, and they're all asking for your time, you know. So it's almost like the perfect analogy for me.
But in some ways, the breakdancing bit is a very creative, expressive form. And obviously the sort of dentistry you're doing is incredibly creative with a great aesthetic outcome. And it makes you wonder whether there's kind of a link between the fact that you're creative, but it's just being channeled and delivered in different ways.
I'd love to see the way Shiraz presents a treatment plan.
It's pretty dogmatic. If you know where I work, it's pretty dogmatic. There's a few shapes in it. I
just think of that creativity. Yeah, I can do your teeth like this.
You're giving away all your moves. I can see it straight away. I think with dentistry, there's a heavy what's the way to put this? There's a heavy focus on it being very scientific. It is very, I mean, there's not a focus. It is a scientific field. You said medical science, which summarize it to a T. I think there are elements to be able to express your creativity. And it's exactly that I need in my life. I need that, you know, I'm the sort of person who needs spontaneity sort of in my life. And the more, as we've been knowing each other for a long time, Andy, right? The more you're doing, the more you're trying to strive to improve and better yourself or whatever, the more funneled your life becomes in terms of time commitments, in terms of being able to be spontaneous. Oh, I just fancy going to the Cotswolds tomorrow. That sort of stuff doesn't really happen. It has to be quite prescriptive. And then when you get this hour, you get to kind of do what you want, and you don't have to think about it in a dogmatic way. I mean, of course, training has a systematic way to do it. If you're competing, you need to be making sure you're doing endurance training, you're doing strength training, you're doing rehearsals for certain types of movements. So there is a science to that as well. But as I've become probably slightly less competitive in the last year, I'd say, especially with COVID, it's given me the chance to just be a bit free and enjoy moving around. And that gives so much solace to the mind. So that if you troubleshooting, we talk about troubleshooting all the time. If you've got a problem and you can't get over it, or actually go away, do something completely off piece, come back, and guess what? You'll probably be able to deal with it, won't you? And that's kind of my off piece type of thing. And you know, unfortunately, with dentistry, sometimes we end up, you know, you treat a lot of patients all day long, and then you'll probably be doing a course in the evening, or you'll be doing a course somewhere, or you'll be going on a conference, or you'll be discussing interdisciplinary treatment planning. It all becomes so insular and so sort of inbred, not in the bad way, but you know, you're all just with dentists all the time, or dental professionals. This takes me out of it. This takes me out of the whole circle. Which is something I need.
When you're doing the Sculpt training, does that sort of give you almost a sort of halfway house to get your creativity out onto that? So whilst you're not throwing shapes, but you are throwing shapes on showing something. Is that how it sort of works?
Yeah. I think Sculpt is for those that may or may not know, it's a program that I've come up with over the years. I've been doing lots of education, and I've systemized in my own mind, in my own way, how we can restore posterior teeth. And copy the anatomy that was given to us, so that rather than being it's actually the anatomy that's carved into the teeth. And I created this sort of system which allows for telecommunication. So we're on Zoom as an example, and people get to tune in live. And the sessions are recorded, so those that miss them get the chance. But it means that we send a subscription box out to people, and they get to just join along, really. Exactly that. It's allowing me, because I've done so much sort of, I suppose, homework or background work, I get to start being manually, dexterously creative, as opposed to creative in terms of other ways. And Sculpt's been a revelation for us, actually, and we've had such great feedback for it. We're still not exactly where we need to be in terms of the infrastructure, unfortunately, but actually we're sold out. Right.
What's standing out for me is the word expression kind of jumps to mind because it's expression in terms of, you know, the expressive work through, you know, sculpt, composite and that, and there's expression through dance. It's a need to express who you are, you know, either professionally or through kind of dance.
In my head, I've sort of got this idea of, you know, that sometimes you get oil that comes through and it seeps up through the ground and it finds a way, even if someone stops it, it sort of finds another way to come up. And that's what I'm sort of seeing, is that you've got this that's part of your core and your being, and ultimately it's going to find its way somewhere. In no matter what you're doing, it's sort of like, oh, there it is.
That's a mega analogy. Actually. I like that, because it is, you know, I don't, and I think, you know, we've talked about this at length, haven't we, Andy? You know, I don't express the way I am for the sake of others, and that's really, really important. It's not, I don't choose sock color or pocket square color or the way I dress for the sake of others. You know, I was having a bit of joyous banter with someone online last week about the clothes that you wear and, you know, why you wear them, whatever. And you know, there was a comment about I'm not going to wear it because so and so says I shouldn't, and this, that, and the other, and whatever. And like I said, it was totally harmless. It was but the words rodeo clown were used to explain my dress sense. So
it was complete banter until the phrase rodeo clown turned up, and it's like, what?
Yeah, thanks for that.
I was like, listen, chap, we need to have a word, don't we? No, it was all in light. But the point I was making is whatever you choose to do, or however you choose to express yourself, or whatever personality traits you have, provided that the number one intention, and I think this is probably one of the main things that if I was going to use a key word for today, it's all about intention. If your intention is to be free or express who you are for the sake of yourself, not because of society, that's what I think speaks volumes. If your intention is good for the patient and it doesn't go quite right, the patient will sense that. And there's so much crossover in things, because I mean, you know, things don't go, you know, to plan all the time. Of course they don't. Anyone that says they do are frankly lying.
I was going to say, I think they're either lying or they're not doing things. There's somebody who just sits on the sideline and pass commentary. We talk a lot about physical health, and we talk about mental health, but it would be wonderful if we could get to a stage in life where we just talked about health, because it's all joined up. It's not one or the other. And have you had periods in your life where you've not been as physically active as you'd like to be, or you are? And has that had an impact on your mental health?
Yes, it has. And I like that, because it is just health. The body is one system. It can be segmentalized or compartmentalized into different systems to simplify it, but in essence, it's one being. And you know, I was with Koray Ferran, as you guys know, a massive mentor, a huge inspiration to me, and actually a leader of the profession in the UK, if not the world. And he talked about an analogy that you've got a stone in your shoe. Okay, you've got a stone in your shoe, and that slightly puts your knee out on one side, and then what that does is the opposite side of the back starts hurting, because there's this reverberation effect.
You compensate,
you're compensating on other things. And I mean, I think there have been times where I'm not as physically active. I mean, even lockdowns are probably an example. Despite us trying to do We Break Fit and keeping relatively fit, I was definitely not training, but I'd say probably a year before that, I definitely wasn't training at the level that I was used to. And you just slowly feel this, I don't know how to put it. It's like this impending doom, because you're not releasing the excess energy or you're not receiving the normal amount of endorphins that you would, or whatever. And, you know, strangely, my mum's mum, my grandmother, she said to me, you need to cut all this training stuff out. Right. So she said it was about 2016. She's like, sack it off. It's a waste of your time. I was like, I don't quite understand. And she had so much intelligence behind this comment. She's like, there's going to come a day where you can't do it to the level that you're doing it, and you're going to get really down about it. And I was like, no, whatever. And now, like 5 years later, I'm like, you will. Yeah. If you have caffeine every day, you upregulate the number of receptors in your brain, so that if you don't have caffeine, you're always sluggish. The same thing applies for your life. If you're not active, if you're really usually quite active, and then you go through a 3-week lull, everything's so much heavier. Everything's so much more laborious. But yeah, it's tough. But then again, when you're maximizing your physical, other things start failing as well. So you might not be able to attend conferences, courses, and it's been a balance. It's like ebbs and flows.
It's hard to fit it all in, isn't it? I think is the issue when you're so busy.
I never expected to hear that, to be honest. That really surprised me.
Well, I must admit, took the words a bit out of my mouth. Really, I was like, "Oh, flip! That's stunning."
Because you're right. You fix problems, albeit in a mouth on teeth. But actually, that skill of fixing problems has a great application in the world of business, because things crop up all the time. And I think about your own practice. You bought your practice in 2018. Virtually immediately embarked on a remodeling program of that practice. So by the time that was in, the work was done, you got settled. It wasn't long before this thing called COVID turned up. So in terms of resilience and what was required, I guess some of those things that had happened in your earlier life, you were probably slightly better placed than lots of people, because in the early days of owning a business, it's a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights anyway, isn't it? You're not entirely sure what you're doing. You're being asked to make a million decisions. You don't really know how to make them. You don't really know what the right answer is, but you just have to keep making them. So how did that feel like when you took over? And why would you buy a business and immediately embark on this radical makeshift of the practice? Was that part of the plan, or did you just feel you couldn't wait?
I think it was strategic to a certain extent, based on, when I bought the business, you could see things. There was only one way it could go. Yeah. Really, to be totally frank with you. So it was similar to, you could say, my life. Really, it's either boom or bust. Really. either you go with it, or just sit on your ass and don't do anything really. But effectively, what kind of inspired me was that I saw that the practice had great potential. It had substantial levels of underinvestment for a long period of time. And the patient base of that clinic didn't know anything else, didn't know any better. They only knew one type of dentistry, which was how it was for the best part of 25, 30 years. So I knew that through, slow and steady, building, eventually we could get it to a stage where we can then I could really remodel it and put my own stamp on it. I would say that process probably took 3 to 6 months initially before we, could really say we ironed out all the major problems. But there were still issues then, and what I found is that as the practice grows and develops, you're always going to have issues. You're always going to have problems, but what's changing is that the class or the caliber of problem changes with time. So
yeah.
And that's what I learned about learning, is that the problem solving becomes more complex, but it ultimately becomes more enjoyable as well. So
yeah, did you make decisions quick enough?
Good question. Did I make decisions quick enough? I would say yes, I did. Yeah. I would say yeah.
Yeah, I think that's always a strong sign of somebody who's truly entrepreneurial, someone that has the ability to make. Barack Obama did a talk in Mexico years ago, and somebody said to him, being president of the United States, it's ridiculous the number of decisions you've got to make, and how do you cope with the scale of the decisions you're making? And he said 51%. He said, if you've got information that leads you towards an answer, and the information you've got gets you to 51%, make a decision. Because if you then make a decision, that puts you on a path. You can always change your mind and make another decision, but at least you've made a decision. And that thing about speed of decision, I think if you make it, you're making progress. It might not be perfect. It might not be exactly where you need to end up, but at least you're making the decision. So it's great to hear that, on reflection, you were making those decisions quickly, because I don't know, but I imagine when COVID hit and, you'd have had to shut your practice in March to June as a minimum, you would have had to again go into a new environment where you had to make another whole heap of decisions quickly.
Yeah. And that's literally how it was. I think, we could see it going that way based on what was happening with the Prime Minister's announcement. I remember in early March, the latter part of March. And then obviously, once the chief dental officer's message came out where everything was just shut down, effectively, the first thing I was thinking was obviously on my team, everything that we built over this period of time. But, how are we going to ride this storm? And ultimately, the business head just went on thinking we've got to manage cash flow over here as quickly and as efficiently as we can. And so I sat down with my practice manager and my team very, very quickly. And we had a robust plan in place, which, reduced the hemorrhaging at that stage as best as we could. Like a lot of other businesses. But yeah, like you said, decisions had to be made,
Yeah. And when you wanted to get this change pushed through in the practice, did you want to reinvent it? Did you want it to come out the other end of the process with your DNA all over it and your stamp? Or were you looking to evolve the thing you've bought? Because quite often, we get lots of questions and people talk about the value of goodwill. The value of goodwill is very high. So one of the things when people buy a dental practice is they want to protect that value. And in many ways, it's quite a bold move to then make the investment and do the work you did, which kind of moves it away from where it was. But did you feel comfortable with that sort of approach?
I think the advice I'll give to anyone is that don't be afraid of making decisions and don't be afraid to put your stamp on things. I think there is a tact in which you do it as well. And I think you often get this question, do you just go in all guns blazing?
Yeah, don't go like a bull in a china shop, yeah.
Exactly. And then effectively, completely destroy what made that practice, because I think that's one way you could possibly lose your team very quickly or the existing that's there. The way I did it, I had very clear ideas of where I wanted the practice to go and very clear ideas in terms of the investment it needed. So, I literally brought my team and my team on that journey, and this may be a shock or surprise to you, but since I've actually taken over the practice, we've not actually lost one member of staff from the pre-existing organization. We kept them all on, and if there's one advice I could give to people, which is slightly different to maybe what's being told, historically, but this is my analysis of it, is that no one generally, when I looked at that practice, everyone had been working there for a long period of time, at least 5 years. So the existing owner must have seen some good qualities in those members of staff.
Dead right. Yeah.
So they all can't be bad. They must be good. And what I've tried to do is just bring them up another notch by another 10, 15%. That's it.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
One of the things we used to say, we haven't done them for a while, but on the courses we used to say to people, you don't go in and sack everybody, because remember, when they were employed, they were the best people at that time, which is exactly what you've just said, and it's brilliant, isn't it? That mould them to be what you want them to be, rather than say, oh, well, they're crap and I'll just get rid of them.
And to think all this came out of just the first 2 seasons.
Oh, yeah, just 2 seasons. Imagine how many more.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.